Hi, we're going to look at this sunset image and do some editing in Affinity. It's a very high dynamic image, and I knew that at the time that this would be a problem, so I took 3 shots of the scene. I took a second shot 2 stops below, and although the foreground is very dark, it's brought out all the colour in the sky. We're not burnt out with the sun, and you can see a lot more definition in the clouds. And for the foreground, I shot 2 stops above, and that's brought out the information in the rocks in the front here. Obviously the sky is completely blown out, but what we're going to do is we'll use HDR merging to bring these 3 photos together as one. What I'll do first, I'll just take the first image in to the develop persona, and you can see from this area here that the picture's completely burnt out, and I can do that by showing the highlight clipping. And to remove that, what I can do is I can go down into the shadows and highlights and just bring the highlights down until I've recovered some of that information. That looks about right. Now the image is still overall a little bit dull, so I'll increase the exposure slightly. There we go. I'll have to go down and bring the highlights down yet again. There we go. And I could play around with this, playing with the black points and the highlights. But I'm not going to take this any further. That's just a basic image, and we'll use the HDR to further enhance this photo. So let's just develop that as a reference point that we can go back to. And now I'm going to go into HDR, add the 3 photos. They're going to be automatically aligned, not particularly necessary. I used a tripod because I was shooting with a filter. Noise reduction, we'll keep it as standard, and we'll go into tone mapping. Let's hit OK and let that start processing. Now once it finishes, we'll get the merged image, and we'll be given a number of presets we can look at. There we go. So let's just have a little look at this. Here's our presets down the side. This is natural. This is just what comes out of the box. It's a little bit bright for my taste, but there's no real burnt out areas. This is detailed, and probably better if I zoom in a little bit, you'll see the difference. If I click on that, it pulls up the local contrast, and you start seeing more detail in the rocks, which I do prefer. We got some other ones here. The one I'll show you is the dramatic one, which will increase the saturation in the sky and also keep the detail. So I think that's the one I'm going to go for today. I can of course change all the individual settings myself here. I'm just going to leave it about the way the dramatic option is, but you've got all your standard controls down here, and you can use them to change the overall tone of the image. But what I really want to do is get into this image and deal with certain areas. So we'll apply that. It'll just take a second to process. There we go. And the first thing I want to do is just generally look at the picture, see if there's anything that needs sorting out before I do any of the normal edits. So for instance, the horizon's not straight. There's a couple of people over here which we don't want. There's some rocks at the edge here which are being cut, so I'll probably take those out. And there's lots of little birds in the water, some of them moving, so I'll tidy those up first. So let's straighten up first. So what I'll do is I'll duplicate this. So I've got the original image, I'll just turn that off. And what I normally do, because it's HDR, what I normally do is rasterize and trim the image just to make it, flatten it out. We'll then go into the crop tool, and part of that is straighten. And if I just grab a line and draw that along the horizon, it'll turn the image around. Now I can do two things. I can either bring the edges of the photo in to get rid of the blank areas here, or I can fill them in. And in this case I'll fill them in because I want to keep to the extent of the photo, so I'll apply that. There we go. And what we want to do is fill in the area. So the first thing is to rasterize and trim it again, just to make sure the edges are done. Then I want to select the edges, and I can do this with alpha, basically the blank areas, and select them, and you see the dotted lines there. What I normally do is, what I also do is also grow by maybe 3 pixels the selection. Let me just apply that, and you can see that here. It's just brought the edge of the photo, the dotted line over the edge, so it's got something to paint in. And then we will basically use the in-paint tool. It'll take a second or two to analyze the photo, and there we have it. It's filled in the edges. So I can deselect that using the deselect tool, and now we can start looking at some of the other problems. So let's start by picking my in-painting brush, and the first thing I'll do is come over these people, take those out. Let's have a look at the various birds here and just tidy them up. Let's just get rid of that. A little bit edge there. So I'm just going around, generally tidying up. Bird there. Now these birds, I don't really want them in this because they're not bringing anything to the photo. They're far away and out of focus. So let's get rid of them as distractions. And we've even got something on the horizon there. There we go. You'd also use this technique if you had any dust spots on your image as well. Right, so that's all those area there. Oh, I was going to take out these boulders. Let's just increase my brush size, and we'll just take that. There we go. And these two here. There we go. Oh. Sometimes get bits you don't expect. Okay, so I'm fairly happy with that. Just a quick look. Get rid of that there. That's okay. So that's a lot tidier. And now that's a good point to start working. So what I would normally do is save at this point. So I'll just save the image. Let's just call it sunset. There we go. Always good to save your work as you're going along. Right, now as I said, I think I want to treat this photo in 2 halves. So I'm going to work with the sky first. So I'm going to pick my selection brush, increase the size, and just select the sky area. There we go. And down to the water itself. Let's just pick that. I'll have to zoom in here, reduce the size of the brush, and come in. And what I can do is pick the Alt key down and deselect. So I can deselect the rock face here. There we go. So that I'm treating this area and this area as one, and then the sky and the sea as the other. Now what I'll do is, let's just have a look. I could probably grab that little bit there. It's not too important because they're not going to be dramatic differences between the two areas, but it's always nice to have a good selection. Let's hit the refine button just to make sure. Yeah, it's looking pretty good. I could include, say, these rocks here, so I can just go in and keep selecting extra bits. There we go. Right, and I think that will do nicely. Now I think I'll just add a slight feather. What that does, it just softens the edge between the selected and unselected. Hit apply, and I'm now ready to make some adjustments. So firstly, I want to increase the saturation, so let's go down here and we go to adjustments and pick vibrance, which is vibrance and saturation, and I can just increase that for the sky. And as you can see, if I overdo it, you can see what I'm doing here. Anytime, if I want to go back to normal, just double click on the little dot and it will go back to 0. So let's just move that up and move the vibrance up. Yeah, fairly happy with that. And I want to get more detail out of the sky there. Right, there's one thing I would maybe do. There's a couple of, and sometimes it's worth just trying. So I'll go into levels, and I can bring the white point over, and that will blow that out. But what I can also do is bring the black point in, and you can see that affecting the sky quite dramatically. So that's one way of adjusting it. I'm going to actually use curves. I'll delete that, and I'll go back in and I'll use curves this time, and this gives me a little bit more control. So on the left is the dark areas, so if I pull that down, you can see the sky coming much more stormy, shall we say, and I can counter that by pushing up the light areas and basically introducing an S curve. That's fine, I like that. But what it's done is the vibrance doesn't need to be as high as I pushed it, so I can bring that back down because it's a little bit overly orange. Let's just bring that down to that area there. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that, and I want to look at the foreground now. So what I can do is invert my selection. So rather than selecting it all over again, just invert, and now this area is selected. And what I want to do is actually almost the opposite. I want to desaturate that area. So again, this time I'll go into HSL, which is hue, saturation and luminosity, and I can grab the saturation and pull it down. Now I picked that rather than black and white because I don't want it truly black and white in this particular instance. I just want to get rid of the vibrant greens in this area here. And when I took this shot, when I was actually physically there, these are very white rocks, and I want to emphasize that. And the sky was bright, and of course the human eye can adjust and see all of this in one go almost, because as soon as you look at the foreground, your iris adjusts and you can see the white rocks, and when you start looking into the sun, the iris will close up. So this is literally what we're doing with the camera, with the 3 shots, where we're adjusting our view depending where we're looking. So there we go. I've reduced the saturation in these rocks. Let's bring it, not take it completely away, but I found the bright green a little bit distracting. Okay, I'm fairly happy with that. So once we've done that, we can just deselect. We don't need the marching ants anymore. The only other thing I'd probably do to this is add a vignette, just to further emphasize the point of view into the center. Pick your option, and if I drop it right down the exposure, I get a dark area on the edges. If I pull it up, I'll get a white area. So I want to bring it down. Let's just start at the beginning again. Just bring it down ever so slightly. I don't want to see the vignette as such. I don't want to see the edge. So the hardness, I can play with the hardness. It's as hard as rock. There we go. So I can bring the hardness down and then bring the exposure back up until it's hardly visible. And I can basically come into here and turn that off and on, off, on, and I'm quite happy with that. I don't think it's overly visible. And there we go. Okay, let's now compare that back to the original image, and you can see a stark difference. You can see particularly the clouded area is much more detailed, and the foreground, but you know, it's much more vivid, and it didn't actually take that long to do. Thank you.